Welcome to Console Empires. Today we're going to learn how to improve at Age of Empires 2 by watching your replays. There's so much going on simultaneously in this game that it can be hard to realize what you're doing wrong in a match, but errors will become a lot more apparent when you're just watching and aren't trying to focus on everything else. It's sometimes pretty surprising how different a replay is going to look versus how you remember it going in-game, which can be a humbling experience until you reach the zen state of accepting that, like me, you're also bad at the game. Alright, so first I'll show you how to save and load replays, go over how to use the spectator controls, and then talk about what to look for while you're reviewing your games. So step 0 is going to be to press X on the post-game screen to save a replay. Next, go to single player and hit load game. This will bring up a menu of all the games you've saved, but you'll need to tap RB to view your replays rather than saved games. The match we're going to watch here is a 1v1 Arabia game that I played last week against Krovoski, who's a top 10 player on the Xbox ladder. So spoiler alert, I lose. But losses are the best games to learn from. You won't grow as much as a player from reviewing replays and watching yourself just crush weaker players. And on the other hand, you probably don't want to focus just on games where you get steamrolled. A good candidate to review is going to be a match that you feel was close enough that if you'd made some changes to your decision making in game, you could have had a chance to win. I get Franks here, and I was pretty happy with that going into the match. Franks are a perennial powerhouse civilization with strong knights, cheap castles, and free farm techs. Slavs, though, also have a great farm bonus, and their ability to get population space from production buildings also allows for some flexibility in your build. As far as the controls, you can press the Y button to change which stats you see in the lower left portion of the screen, and I like to start off with this one showing villager population and idols, but it's also useful to compare resources, score, or army composition at times too. This panel does sometimes randomly reset when you change players, so watch out for that. The D-pad by itself controls time, but if you want to reveal the map, you hit RB with D-pad up. I like leaving the Fog of War on in Dark Age to compare scouting, but switching it to all visible later in the game. RB and the view button cycles between showing the score above the minimap or the comparison queue in the top right corner. And to change players, you hold the right trigger and select a slice from the wheel. Alright, so looking at the game now, I'm starting off here with a bit of a score lead as I'm using my geese to scout, while Krovoski just has his huddled under the TC. He's got the shift queue going to keep the villagers efficiently harvesting one by one. And so as far as the score, some players kind of like fixate it on a lot as far as trying to infer what your opponent might be doing. And at a very high level where players are more likely following the meta more precisely, that can be more useful, but I feel like that for like low and midi-low, that there's enough variety in what people are actually doing that my point is don't psych yourself out looking at the score, because you can't necessarily say like, oh, they're for sure pushing deer right now or something like that when the score difference could be because of a mistake or using auto scout, for example. Which scouting is scouting as far as the score is concerned, but the prioritization of how a player is going to look for things differently than the auto scout means that those fewer points from scouting are more valuable if you've got better scouting. And so far, we're both doing a pretty decent job, I think, with the scouting, looking around, finding the resources. Blue's got a couple geese on the way home there, has taken one boar and located the next. He's got the house coming up beside the wood line, where I went for the house before the boar, so my lore comes in a little bit later, but all the same, pretty even game so far. But I'm about to actually make my first big mistake here. So you see that sliver unexplored there on the southwest edge of my base? I realized I'm missing some sheep, so I send the scout back, retracking his steps, trying to find those sheep, but I actually never find them, so I'm at a disadvantage leaving the Dark Age here. And the Franks with the free horse collar helps with that a little bit, but I maybe should have pushed in a deer to compensate for that lost food, which is also something if you get lamed, like if your opponent comes forward and steals your boar, pushing in your deer to make up for that can be a good thing to do. Where the trade-off with pushing is that you're losing scouting information, but you know that if your opponent was focusing on microwing their scout to steal your boar, that they were similarly not at that time using it to scout. So I like the back wood line here in Krovoski's base, and mine is sort of on the front, so not as good. But the next boar lore comes in okay, and it looks like that we still are tied at 17 in population, so we've had about the same amount of idle time so far, about to click up as I've got Loom in the queue. And with Franks, I could have sent another vill or two to berries as they get a berry bonus. But it looks like that Krovoski does push in his deer. I don't actually push any in this game. And this deer is, well, the ibex, excuse me. They all used to be deer, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, back in the original version of the game, that the new expanded fauna, who I think was added in Forgotten Empires. Which I didn't play this game for like several years, kind of in the middle. Like the whole like HD era I missed. Like I played on the Conqueror's CD and then on Voobly, and then not for a while until recently I got Definitive Edition on. I had a Intel Mac for a while that I was playing on, and then upgraded to M1 only to find out that that doesn't work anymore. Okay, so this wall here at the back of my base, I never actually finished that. I accidentally end up shift queuing this builder back to the wood line, not letting him finish the wall, and that ends up causing me a bit of a problem in a minute, as it affects how I react to the rush when it comes in, and I end up taking more damage because of it. So the men-at-arms rush is on the way. Krovoski went up with one more population than I did, and you see he's got the one villager there to harvest the 10 gold needed to make 3 militia. So we've got the scout out now looking for my base to figure out where to send those militia as they come out. And he's going to find me here and spot the palisade tile, but doesn't react. That if you see a partial wall, you could sometimes look around to find the builders and get a kill. Oh, so I'm just like trying to be annoying here, knowing that you get the scout upgrade when you hit feudal. I thought maybe I could snipe that gold miner, but the second villager comes over to defend and I back off. But so yeah, back to this men-at-arms rush that I think it's really hard to place the individual wall tiles like exactly around the berries like that you see pro players do to protect them. So I, at this point, I knew what was going to happen, and I knew what a good play would be to stop that was, and then just didn't do anything for whatever reason. That sometimes you have a thought, even if it's the right idea, and don't actually get to execute it because you get distracted by whatever else is happening in the game. And so I could have went with like a bubble wall around the mill here, but don't. And this ends up being a big moment where how, despite I've been able to maintain a bit of a lead through the Dark Age so far, that I'm kind of going to throw all that away by not being prepared to defend from this rush that I knew was coming. And our scouts even just bump into each other there without fighting, as I've got my gather point set forwards, and now bring him back to try to deal with this rush, but take a bad fight. That with so many villagers out there, and with how much time I had from spotting the barracks, I very much could have got some better defenses up in time to prevent getting pushed off of my berries here. And even now, I've got the scouts just idling, rather than maybe going back to counterattack at his base or keeping an eye on what he's doing with the militia. He does find my geese down there by the cliff, and as I send the villagers back, I expect that he's looping around to the back and move my scouts to the unfinished wall, which ends up being a mistake as he never tries to come through that way. So my little lead is very quickly evaporating before our eyes as I've got these scouts out of position, not protecting the villagers who were sent back to work, as the men-at-arms come right back and end up getting their first kill here, which adds to the growing population lead that Blue has, now being ahead by 2 villagers and 3 military units, as I don't even have all of my scouts engaging in this fight, and the villagers are being pulled away, taking more damage, not taking resources, and there we go, bringing all the scouts over, and I decide to go ahead and take this fight, which goes okay. You see, that's my starting scout there on stand ground, so not contributing. That I could have got some more damage in quicker and had maybe a scout or 2 survive this had I had them all on aggressive or defensive stance. Or even just got the villagers involved sooner, as with that many villagers versus just a couple men-at-arms with the scouts, that the villagers would have been not taking too heavy losses while contributing to getting the fight, but ooh, doink from the spear as soon as my scout comes out. And that's basically just throwing away 80 food there. Another play that I could have made in that instance, instead of trying to defend the wrong side of my wood line and then committing to that fight, would have been, again, also had the walls been better, given me the opportunity to just go ahead and raid in his base, which I don't really get to do much this game. So we've got the spearmen now attacking my mill, as I've got a second wood line up on the back, and Krovoski has also started to wall, but kind of on the wrong side, leaving the front side, like the side facing me, so open, had I been more aggressive, would have been a mistake to allow me such easy access, especially with a strong scout civ like Frank's. And so here are the 2 geese that I never found. But I've got more scouts coming out, and I'm adding a range here, thinking that we've got spears and likely archers to follow the men-at-arms, that I'd want to have some skirmishers. And accidentally then chase this spearman too far with the villagers, giving up some idle time, as the rush has caused me to make so many mistakes that we were really close. We'll have the same population and I had the score lead, and then now it's completely flipped that I'm 100 points behind, 3 villagers behind, have half as many kills and a smaller army, that from what was a decent start in the Dark Age, despite the challenges, that the game was going better for me up until the fighting started, basically. That, what's the quote, that everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face? Like that's what just happened here. So big group of spearmen coming in. You don't always see the offensive spearman, is kind of an interesting choice, but if he's expecting that I was going to maybe go double stable and commit heavily into scouts, that could have been the play. So I still am not able to get the walls down, as the spearmen that I just criticized are successfully denying the walls. But I got the archer here who's got some awesome pathing going on, and the TC fire is gonna get a couple kills. So 6 to 8 now, while I am certainly playing from behind at this point, it is not at the moment insurmountable. That if I could get a good counterattack in here, I haven't lost the game yet at this point. This is a mistake trying to force the wall down under the archer fire. I do, in a moment, place a tower here on the gold, and maybe doing that earlier would have been a better play. But the archers being in my base now, again, prevents me from going to his, as I'm able to get some hits in, and one does go down, but I do then take a hit from the spear and have to back off, trying to loop around here and get away from the spear and back onto the archers, but he's cut me off, gets another hit, the scout goes down, and I'm still losing all my scouts, taking damage on the gold, and have 6 idle villagers at this point, while he has none. The rush is very effective at this point, as my position is rapidly deteriorating here, as the spearman is maybe gonna get a kill here, and no, I fight him back. But look at how much wood Krovoski has in the bank right now. And why I point that out is because it's important to remember that even when you're behind, that your opponent is making mistakes too, even though you can't feel them. So say if he had invested that wood sooner into farms, or even just dumped it into the market, he could have got to Castle Age even faster, and this game wouldn't have been as close as it was. Where, because of that mistake, I've been able to hang on to this point and feel like I still have a shot to come back in the game, even though I've been on the back foot the whole time. But had he been able to keep the same amount of pressure on while building up his eco more effectively at home, I really would have had no chance. So I do clean up his army at this point, got the skirms out, and you see I've only got 31 wood. I have a little bit of food, but that could be good at this point, as we're getting to the point where I should be thinking about Castle Age. But decide to keep producing, as I realize that I actually have a moment to breathe here and can go and get that counterattack in. So I'm sending my little AI army across the map here, the slow-mo on the scout as he's grouped up with my ranged units. But the population is now pretty close, that I've only 1 villager behind and have the larger army, but he is up to Castle Age. So like late feudal is in my opinion the weakest part of my gameplay, that it's a big inflection point where do you decide, do you want to commit or do you want to go up? And I feel like I make the wrong choice like 80% of the time. So better scouting is something that can improve that. But I had more or less no idea what he was doing at his base late feudal, because I never got there basically until he was in Castle Age. And at this point, I have decided to commit to making more feudal age units as opposed to sometimes when I see that my opponent has reached the next stage before I've even clicked, like what happened here, I'll just like use the market to get up, which can be a mistake as well, because then if you're using those resources to advance and not make army, that then it can be useless, that you just, the imp into GG, as they say. But here, going the other route and trying to continue producing feudal age units doesn't end up working for me either, as I'm just not able to get enough damage in to protect myself or keep him at home, as he's getting his town centers up, effectively shutting down any feudal age raiding potential that I might have had a window for at this point anyway. So this massive scouts here, had I sent them around to his base as soon as they were created, I could have got some harassment in and maybe delayed the knights arriving without even needing to kill anything. Just being in his base and causing him to react to that could have prevented the knights from getting here as quickly as they did, which makes my late tower essentially useless, as the knights are easily going to just mow it down. Had I been able to get a house up behind the palisade to keep the knights out, the tower might have been a bit more effective. And so at this point, we have about the same army size, but I mean, castle age units versus feudal age units, even though I did just get the infantry armor for the spears, it's just not enough here, as I'm trying to garrison, not ready to give up just yet, sending the spears in, but the knights are of course going to use the mobility and run away, as I call the GG here. All right, so what did I do right? So I did a pretty decent job with the Dark Age. I had a little bit of idle time and didn't find the sheep, but was able to get up first and had better scouting and a score lead because of it at that stage in the game. And I think compared to my opponent, I did a better job at spending my resources, as I didn't have quite as much piling up in the bank. And I was able to get more farms out more quickly. But advantages in your economy pay off later. The aggression pays off now. And that's really where I lost the game. That the pressure from his rush was just better. I barely got in any damage at all. And he's got the right idea at this point, getting the 3 TCs up pretty quickly, as once you've established a lead at this point in the game, then you can kind of sit back and boom, as your opponent is just not going to be able to catch up. But good game though, and maybe I'll get him next time. So thank you guys for watching, and I hope that you learned something about learning from your replays from this. And if you did, be sure to hit the like and subscribe button, and I'll catch you next week.